Hi AJ, this is Michael from BetterTOEFLScores.com. I'm getting ready to listen to your integrated speaking practice test. So you did one yesterday. I gave you some feedback. So you say in your email, here's my integrated task 4 of TPO 25. Since you asked last time to add from where the topic was described, I tried to follow that and gave an answer as natural as I could with an integrated for a question. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain two ways weathering occurs. So you have a lecture, you're explaining those points from that lecture. Okay, here we go,
The
AJ.
listening talks about a condition called weathering. He describes the phenomenon as when air and water are exposed to huge rocks and also temperature change as well as living organism can
As as well as. So you're not pronouncing some of those words
um,
clearly.
ex- get exposed to rocks, and this way when the huge rocks breaks apart, it is called weathering. So to begin with, the professor says that water can easily break rocks apart is when water gets inside of cracks, and this way the water gets freezed over the night, and
Yeah, I like how you're putting more voice markers in there. It makes it more formal and it makes it sound like a summary. So good job on that.
later on the water gets expanded and the cracks gets bigger. So this is how
The water expands and the grass gets bigger, right? So I think be careful about the verbs you're using to explain the lecture, right? So if you're explaining the information, if you're summarizing that content, simple present tense verbs work really well. So be careful about shifting from a past tense to a present tense verb.
the rocks break apart. Later on he talks about plants. When plant seeds actually gets inside of cracks and it actually starts to grow, the crack starts to get much more bigger, and this way the rocks breaks apart.
I would just say it starts to get much bigger, not much more bigger. So more already means ER. You don't have to mark the comparative twice. So one syllable adjectives typically take ER or EST. Now if you use the word more, you'll usually use that with longer adjectives. Usually adjectives that have three or more syllables.
And so this is how the
For example, the word intelligent. She's more intelligent than her friend. So in that case, I would say more, not intelligenter than her friend.
professor explains the phenomenon. The professor
Okay,
in the
so I think you did a better job with your voice markers. It is very clear that what you just explained is a summary. Let me listen to it one more time.
listening talks about a condition called weathering. He describes the phenomenon as when air and water are exposed to huge rocks and also temperature change as well as living organism can get exposed to rocks, and this way when the huge rocks breaks apart, it is called weathering. So to begin with, the professor says that water can easily break rocks apart is when water gets inside of cracks, and this way the water gets freezed over the night, and later on the water gets expanded and the cracks gets bigger. So this is how the rocks break apart. Later on he talks about plants. When plant seeds actually gets inside of cracks and it actually starts to grow, the crack starts to get much more bigger, and this way the rocks breaks apart. And so this is how the professor explains the phenomenon.
Okay.
The professor in the listening talks
All right, that's good. So let's take a look at the rubrics here. I think listening to it, I think, delivery and language use, you're having problems in both of those areas. So, with your language use, I want you to combine some of your sentences a little bit more. Sometimes you use a lot of short, simple sentences subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb. So, go to the grammar part of my course, study the lesson called Sentence Variety. And I even have some sentence variety practice exercises. I think that's a good thing for you to work on there. With delivery, you need to work on varying your tone more, vary that tone more than you did. And then when you're using the pacing and you're grouping certain words together within those thought groups, but you're sometimes not clearly pronouncing those words within those thought groups. Now, I know that you want to try to make those words sound like one long word, but you still need to make sure you're pronouncing the sounds in the words that you speak. So you have to work a little bit on your enunciation. That means careful articulation of the vowel and the consonant sounds of American English. So I think you're in the 2 area here, right? So I'm going to put you at maybe 2.5. I'm going to say maybe 17 to 18 points out of 30 on this practice test.